Now, delegates at the INTO, of course the Irish National Teachers Organisation, their Congress in Killarney, have issued stark warnings to government over the growing impact of the cost of living crisis on teachers, passing a series of emergency motions that highlight mounting financial pressures, concerns over school funding and the potential for industrial action. Amid rising inflation and ongoing disputes over pay and allowances, union leaders caution that failure to address teachers' concerns could trigger significant unrest. To get a sense of what's been going on, I'm joined on the line now by Gareth Heagney, the INTO rep for Clare and of course principal of Sixmilebridge National School. Gareth, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Good morning, Alan. Thanks for the invitation to speak with you.
There are some serious issues, clearly, as I outlined there in my introduction, that are being discussed. But what is the overall mood among members and teachers? Is it frustration? Is it anger? Or is there a relief that some of this is being aired and hopefully those in power will heed the message that's been sent their way?
Yeah, broadly, there's a real sense of frustration, Alan, amongst the 900 delegates from INTO branches across the country that attended Congress in Killarney this week since Monday. Actually, a quick shout out to the Clare delegates who are making their way home this morning. But there was good, robust debate. We had 30 motions passed, and they'll form INTO policy for the year ahead and guide the work of the CEC. Pay and conditions, as you mentioned, were real top priorities for delegates, and that contributed to a lot of the debate at Congress this week. But there were other issues as well that continue to be very important issues and priorities for INTO members, including class size, workload for teachers and principals, particularly those in small schools. That's an ongoing challenge, and it's particularly relevant for our members here in County Clare. Then we have adequate resourcing for inclusive education. The government is saying a lot about what it's doing for special education and children with additional needs, but there's a lot that they're not doing. And that was challenged during the course of Congress.
Okay. The pay issues, I mean, look, I guess perhaps in a big way it's been an issue for a long time, Gareth, but I guess has been put into starker focus with the ongoing cost of living situation. What are the key issues or grievances with pay?
Well, there are two components to the pay grievances that INTO have. The first arose in the form of an emergency motion this week, and it noted with grave concern the most recent inflation figure, which is of 3.6% to the end of March 26, and predictions of increasing inflation throughout this year due to the ongoing geopolitical unrest and its subsequent negative impact on teachers' living standards. The current public services pay agreement expires in June of this year. And the second frustration relates to that, because the local bargaining component, which was a key element within the public services pay agreement, is not yet concluded. And even though members were to receive the benefit of that in their pay slips and in their salaries on the 1st of September 25, it still hasn't been delivered by government. And that's a huge frustration, and members are feeling that government is treating them with contempt and with disrespect. And so I suppose to answer your original question, that's brewing a growing feeling of frustration and disrespect amongst teachers.
The workload, you touched on that as an issue as well. Is that connected to another issue which we've spoken about on the show before when we're discussing education and schools, which is the difficulties for some schools, or many schools, in finding, locating and recruiting teachers, and that means that the curriculum is spread further across the teachers that are there. Some teachers having to teach subjects they're not super across, or is it other problems or niggles that are feeding into the workload?
Yeah, the workload is a problem that has grown beyond belief over the last number of years. There are so many expectations of principals and teachers in schools every day. We previously, Alan, spoke about the impact of the rollout of the hot meal scheme on principals and teachers in particular over the last number of weeks. But you have a new curriculum coming down the track for September. There is no provision of adequate training and support for teachers in the rollout of the new curriculum, and particularly the new subject areas. There is a growing complexity in classrooms nowadays in terms of the complex needs that children are presenting with. And in the context of inadequate therapeutic supports, inadequate structures and clinical services available from the HSE. Teachers are more and more burdened in their classrooms. So, actually, just to speak for a moment, because it's relevant to County Clare, on the issue of workload, we've been pushing, and it came up in debate during the course of the week, the Small Schools Project. There are a number of small school clusters happening around the country. There are 6 actually in total, and it's a pilot scheme that the department has rolled out as a result of a lot of pressure from the INTO, and the intention is to support the sustainability of small schools, and there are a lot of small schools, particularly in West, North and East Clare, and we know that there are a number of them that are facing closure. We know that there's some amalgamation this summer, and in an effort to alleviate some of the pressures that principals in particular are facing, we've been pushing for a cluster administrative officer to alleviate some of the burden on principals, because a lot of the work that happens in schools, a lot of the tasks that have to be completed, are neither the responsibility of the teachers or the principals, or indeed others like the secretary in the school. They're actually fundamentally the responsibility of the Board of Management. But the Board of Management structure is based on volunteers, and ultimately in that sense, the work falls back on principals. So the CAO, or the Cluster Administration Officer's function, would be to take on some of those tasks across a number of schools. So, for example, the closest cluster to us in Clare would be the Gort cluster of schools. There are 5 there. Some of them actually are located in Clare, so across the county boundary, and it has been a game changer. And we're pushing for the national rollout of that scheme to all small schools. That's all schools with 4 mainstream class teachers or less, as a matter of urgency. And I think that will be a massive step forward for primary education.
Gareth, the school funding, another major topic. Can you give us a sense of what specific challenges the likes of your own school, Sixmilebridge National School, are facing with rising costs? I presume heating and utilities are a concern.
Well, the main function of the capitation grants, Alan, are to meet the day-to-day running costs of schools. So you're talking about the big items like insurance, and in our school, similar to many other schools, when we paid our insurance bills, nearly 40% of our capitation grant is gone. When you add to that then electricity, lighting, heating, you're coming close to the 80-90% of the capitation grant. In some schools, that's simply not enough. And over the course of the year, they're running deficits. So we've spoken previously as well about the situation in our own school where we're running a deficit every year, and we have no choice but to do large fundraising events. So and what adds to the frustration, and you'll see that the theme here is around frustration, the capitation rates paid per child to primary schools are about half of what's paid to post-primary schools, even though the costs are the same. The insurance companies are the same, the insurance premiums are the same, policies are the same, the suppliers of the electricity and the heat and the light are the same as well, so the utility costs are the same. So there's no justification for the disparity. And more schools we know are going to the department expressing their difficulties in relation to the financial management within their schools and the lack of funding to meet the day-to-day costs, and more are simply being told that all the department is willing to do is to give an advance in their capitation rates. So, for example, there are a number of schools in Clare who aren't due to get the next large instalment of the capitation grant until next January. But in May and June of this year, they'll be forced to draw down that grant earlier because they're running out of money.
Gareth, just chatting about this with you there, I'm thinking of a recent conversation I had on the show with Cathal Crowe, of course, Fianna Fáil TD, but chair also of the Oireachtas Education Committee. And the reason he was on recently was to chat about him and the committee's recent, fact-finding mission in Finland, and this report they've issued on foot of that, which has highlighted a number of recommendations for primary and secondary schools, such such as having more learning breaks, and maybe this would suit in terms of, you were discussing the workload being an issue. They're recommending a condensed list of subjects, other types of reforms as well, but also in terms of, I guess, costs as well. He believes school water charges have to go. I just wonder what you made of their findings, how workable, how achievable some of those are, and how supportive you or your organisation might be.
Yeah, we really welcomed the remarks from the Joint Oireachtas Education Committee, because they really aligned with some of our own views. For example, like the volume of subjects that teachers and children are expected to engage with from next September is much more than what has been the case heretofore. And we would have a concern that some of the key subject areas, particularly language, so including English and Irish, will have a reduced time allocation in the new curriculum next year. The other aspects that Cathal Crowe and his colleagues spoke about included more time for well-being support in schools, and I think this speaks to the need for us as a society, as educators, as parents, to look in more detail at what we really want out of primary education. What is the function? What are the goals of primary education? With the introduction of some new subjects, including technology and STEM subjects, at the expense of some of the fundamental skills that children need in terms of reading, writing, language, communication, social skills development. We have to ask, where are we going as a society where these things are being diminished in terms of their importance and being replaced by other elements that some will argue are more geared towards developing workers in schools rather than, or future workers in schools rather than citizens and members of the society.
Okay, we do have to park that there for the moment. But Gareth, I appreciate you bringing us up to date with what's been happening at the Congress. Thanks for joining us, and no doubt we'll be speaking to you again soon.
Thanks, Alan.
That's Gareth Heagney, the principal of Sixmilebridge National School, also the Clare INTO rep.